Another year, another set of reviews from Dragnix, starting off with a game that doesn't actually do well for me because I don't eat my vegetables. Well, I guess you don't eat vegetables in this game, you actually just kill them, so... okay? Guess this is on brand? Turnip Boy Robs a Bank, released on January 18th, 2024, on the Nintendo Switch, the Xbox Series X and S, and the PC, both on Steam and on the Xbox Game Pass. It cost $14.99, and is a follow-up to the great Turnip Boy Commits Tax Evasion. However, this time around, the genre has changed from a more Link to the Past type adventure game to a more roguelite, fast-paced top-down shooter, with humor still mixed in. So, can our young turnip succeed in becoming a paralyzed Butch Cassidy? Or will I make a more ridiculous analogy in this review? Let's find out. The basic story is what you'd expect based on the original Turnip Boy. Absolute nonsense, and I'm here for it. Basically, you learn that your father was the leader of a crime family that you've never heard of, and a rival gang leader named Dilatini wants to work with you to rob a bank. That's the story simplified, but really it's just the setting for the jokes and gameplay that is at the core of Turnip Boy. And let's focus on the gameplay first. Turnip Boy Robs a Bank is a top-down roguelike shooter that has one map that you'll make steady progress in over time, unlocking new areas as you defeat bosses and make more money. Money is the core of the system here, as it'll buy you a majority of what you need, whether it be critical items to open up new areas, or upgrades so that you live just a little bit longer, or shoot a little bit harder. You have 2 slots for weapons, which you can bring 2 standard ones that have infinite ammo at the start. These are things like SMGs and pistols. But enemies will drop a variety of weapons, ranging from a corncob minigun to a weed whacker of sorts. Typically, ammo-based weapons are stronger than the starting weapons, but as time goes on in the game, the consistency of your base weapons are usually enough to get you through things, especially when you unlock things like the chainsaw and rocket launcher. The unique gimmick for this game is the timer. Basically, it's a bank heist. You have only a limited amount of time before you'll be swarmed by the Peach Fuzz, aka the cops. It's not an instant game over for the run if it does go to 0, but you'll be swarmed the longer you are there with more and more enemies, and it's basically telling you to get to the truck in no unspecific terms. Now, it does add a sense of urgency to the gameplay at first, especially when you don't have some of the extensions of the upgrade system, but it can be annoying with some of the game's other mechanics, but more on that later. The shooting feels fine, and the combat is what you would expect from any top-down shooter like, well, this game. Your dodge has a reasonable distance that can be upgraded, and the speed of the gameplay is fine. Although, you will find that the corridor nature of the map starts to get old when it comes to movement. There's plenty of times where I'd stumble on some piece of furniture or some little thing when circle strafing or dodging enemy fire. And that's all over the place in this map, except in the boss rooms. I played with a controller despite the fact that keyboard and mouse was probably the easier and more accurate choice. It's just my preference for a game like this. And while certain weapons had some variance in firing that could be an issue at longer ranges, it wasn't anything that caused enough frustration to really drag the game down in any sort of way. The thing though is that if you're hoping for Turnip Boy Robs a Bank to set a standard or be in the high tier of top-down shooters, I regret to inform you that unfortunately, you're not getting the quality of something like Enter the Gungeon in the gameplay here. In most cases, the game is just too easy when it comes to the difficulty, especially in the first 3/4 of the game. Now, maybe for new players this won't be the case, but I found that the health and ammo drops, along with the fact that most enemies can be killed at range pretty easily without being in any sort of danger, you're not going to really run into problems with anything that you run into except your own attention span. enemies for the most part are rather basic, shooting some projectiles and not having any crazy patterns a lot of the time. Hell, once you get a hang of it, you can bypass most of them with your base speed and ignore them. Which yeah, you can earn some money by killing them, but most of the big money comes from specific gems you find in the environment or drops that you get, so you can do that. Now with what I just said, this actually changes in the last portion of the game, and the game gets a difficulty spike that I think will drive people crazy. In the last gauntlet, you have to defeat all 4 bosses up to that point, with the time limit mind you, although it does pause at certain bosses, and then have a gauntlet to avoid enemies in very narrow areas that I don't want to show you here because it'll spoil some story elements. Regardless, this might have worked if the game had worked up slowly and surely to that difficulty, but this last spike just ended up pissing me off more than anything, especially because if you fail, you have to do it all again, even when there's a pretty easy checkpoint that could have been added in the middle of this that would have made a lot of logical sense. It felt like the game was just wasting my time, and that last gauntlet feels very bad. That's the best way I can put it. Remember how I indicated that you could run into things in the early goings of this game? Multiply it 10 times in this last area. But I will say, I know that in general, people that have played this game that I checked with after completing a majority of this review prefer this game to the original game. And I actually feel like I'm on the other side of the fence here. I prefer Turnip Boy Commits Tax Evasion a lot more. And that actually has to do with the way the game integrates the time element with the writing. And the funny thing is that I'm going to dock the game points for something for my own experience that I'm not sure if I could specifically say will happen to all players. But I'm also not sure if it's entirely an enhancer in my scoring system. Let me try to explain. The immediate effect of adding a timer that is obviously pushing you to get in and out quickly and run through tasks is that you are in the mindset of rushing. You've got things to do and the timer is your enemy. So when you come across a quest to do in the game, even though the game isn't taking time off during that time you're interacting with the quest giver or the character, you're still in that rush mindset. You're ready and raring to go, and the speed in which the game allows you to get through the prompts for those elements is pretty substantial. Which is a problem, because when it comes down to it, the thing that works well for Turnip Boy in this game, and in the tax evasion version, is its comedic writing. Whether the game is making goofy puns with the name of characters based off of veggies, or recreating scenarios that have great punchlines, the writing is one that will get you to giggle, laugh, and just smile in many different forms. You'll hit a gambit of laughter here, and it hits a good amount of different areas of comedy if you allow yourself to really read what the characters are saying and not skimming through it. Not saying that you won't get jokes if you skim through it, but some of the best jokes and references, you'll need to read through it. And well, that goes against the sort of speedy nature of the game. Now, is it possible that my own personality type was susceptible to the timer element and that a majority of players may not run into that problem? I suppose that's possible, but I do think that it's more than just me. Games set tones based on writing and gameplay, and the prime example I can point to is any survival horror. The fact is that in those games, you want to go slow and steady at first because you don't know what's around the corner and need to take things in. You need that information, and it's set up by the game and its story and the elements around you, the resource management, everything along that line. It's similar here, it's just the other way around. It wants you to go fast. It wants you to be Sonic. I do want to get back to the quality of the writing though, as there's every reason to talk to every NPC you come across, because the jokes and little stories told across the board are pretty fun and comical. Whether it be a poor soul who wants her own set of friends that end up being all different versions of pet rocks. I'm not looking at Vlad right now, no, not at all. To a mother and daughter who are in different phases of their lives and yet still connected. You get some good moments of retrospection and emotion, and usually followed by a good joke. There's not a lot of duds here, and even some of the more obvious jokes, like with NFTs and Bitcoin mining, were still worth the time. However, the quest element that drives a lot of those sub-stories can be a little strange, because of the way that the game plays with the map at times. See, quests can be grabbed at any point and done at any time, and everyone on the main map stays where they are in every run. There's no procedural generation when it comes to their location, with the exception of the elevators. They are randomized every time you enter the map. These elevators, which will take you to a random floor and set of rooms. And there's no real pattern to which one will show up in any run in the locations the elevators are. Which gets really annoying, especially if you're looking to complete a quest and can't find that specific elevator floor that you're looking for. The thing is, you can get the same room in different parts of the elevators on the same run. In the first elevator and the 7th elevator, it could be the same thing where you're actually coming out of the first elevator opening even though you went into it on the 7th one. Doesn't make a lot of sense. Even with that annoyance, I think what actually really annoyed me about Turnip Boy Robs a Bank, more than anything, was actually the little technical hitches that I kept running into. Not performance-wise, mind you. That was fine. FPS was stable, and I think it was at 60, but I didn't measure it. But things like the controller menu navigation. Trying to look through the task list wasn't working well. It kept on not selecting the menu and would go outside the menu and not do anything. In addition, sometimes the game really did not like being in full screen and me alt-tabbing out of it, to the point where it'd be a struggle to get it back into it. Now, there were little bugs here and there, the worst being when I got stuck in this fountain. It isn't interactable at all at any time. I'm just stuck here. Can't dodge out, can't do anything, and that run is basically nothing now because, well, I'm stuck there for all eternity as a wet turnip. Let's move on and talk about the presentation a little bit. The pixel artwork is simple but effective, mostly due to the creature and character designs based on food. Some of them do leave a little bit to be desired. The gummy worms, for example, don't really scream being covered in sugar. They just feel like worms that are multicolored. But the rock candy being slow and lumbering with jagged edges that break into smaller pieces when you hit them does work over time. And when the designs hit in this game, especially with the boss creatures, they hit. Granted, the presentation isn't anything that will blow you away in the gameplay department. The animation is fine, and it mostly does the job when it comes to not getting in the way of gameplay but supporting it. I say mostly because, at times, I found myself getting overwhelmed with the amount of small things on screen. Keep in mind though, I was sick playing through this game, so that may have contributed to it. The actual character portraits have a bit more life and the detail to really appreciate the characterization that it adds to each of the foods. And I really do love the shaking movement when everyone talks. It does actually add a lot to the conversation, surprisingly. Here's a collection of some of my favorite designs in the game, because really, I do think it's one of my favorite things. There's some creativity here, and it's like the first game, I just can't take my eyes off of it. Sound design in Turnip Boy Robs a Bank is impactful in a lot of ways. The hit of a rocket from your rocket launcher has real oomph to it, and the weapon sounds in general will give you the attention that they deserve. You do get secondary sounds like oomphs and reactions to your weaponry, and the game does give the small details like prompt approvals and information like it the relevance in the sound design that it deserves. Every now and again though, a sound will feel a little bit off in the big picture, maybe due to being undermixed in the sound. But regardless, listen and hear what I'm talking about. The music is fine. There's not a whole lot of good or bad to say about it. You do get tracks that up the tempo and create a vibe, but it actually doesn't really stand out with any specific track that I wanted to listen to over and over again. Weirdly, it was a situation where I felt like the music was too generic for the game. I don't know how you'd make the sound more food related, but I feel like the use of maybe some more comical instruments or offbeat instruments would have gone a long way in helping the tone of the game. Listen and you'll hear what I'm talking about. In the end, Turnip Boy Robs a Bank is a solid game that has some good laughs in it, and is a game that I think is perfect for the Xbox Game Pass formula. It's a good time, it can be picked up for a round or two to enjoy, about 4 hours of gameplay time, and you'll feel like your time is reasonably well spent despite some nitpicks here and there. The thing is, however, is that for all the solid parts that are in the game, not many of the elements stand out for you to need to play it right now. Yes, there's great comedy writing here, you'll get laughs out of it. There's good creature designs and some fun weapons. But the things that drag it down, the drag of the timer implementation that hurts the game's comedy chops, the repetitive nature of the gunplay that gets too easy, the spike of the difficulty at the end of the game, they drag elements that make the game stumble at key parts. I think the original game was a better overall package when it came to the experience, but I do appreciate what was done here, and it's still worth your time at the right price. The game gets a 73 out of 100, making it a niche buy, unless you're hurting for cash. But that doesn't take into account my enhancer system, which takes the more subjective elements of games and tries to match a game to you. If you fall into one of the following categories, add or subtract that score to the main score. If the first digit of your score changes, refer to this chart to see if the game lies in the buyability rating for you. Anyway, if you made it this far into the review, I thank you for watching. If you want to see more content like this, hit that subscribe button. And if you think the video was helpful, hit that like button. If you're new to the channel, keep in mind that I try to do a review every 2 weeks. Now, I know it's been a while since I had made a review, but one, I was sick for about a week, and two, the end of the year video I do, that top overlooked games list, yeah, that takes a shit ton out of me. As to what the next review is going to be, Parasite Eve is coming along in terms of I will be streaming it more and more and start that review. I do have a game called, I think it's called Witch Hand, that is going to come out on February 7th that I will start to play and get a review for. And I did play Home Safety Simulator, and I do think that is worth a review. It was an interesting game, it's just going to be one of those games where the price point is going to drive people away, but I do want to talk about it. But if you have a recommendation for a review or a game that is upcoming that you want me to review, leave it in the comments section below. Anyway, that's it for now, and as always, keep on gaming.